ग्लोबल स्किल डेवलपमेंट मिशन में आपका स्वागत है।
I've got to show you now how we can take an image and pull it off of its background. Maybe we want to use it in some kind of a composition or some kind of a layout that we're going to build inside Photoshop. So, in other words, I want to take our statue. If I flip back to our statue for a second, of course, he's on a background layer. What if I wanted to take this image, which, as you can see, was photographed on a very drabby, kind of dreary day? What if I wanted to pull the statue off of this background and perhaps replace the background with a bright blue sky, something like that? Well, as a matter of fact, that's exactly what I want to do. So I've got to figure out a way to pull the statue off of the background so that I can manipulate it just like we can manipulate our other two images. Okay, so let's check this out. First of all, I'm going to close out of Always Bright Ideas. I won't bother saving, and same with Go Get Array. We'll close out of that as well. Going all the way back down to our JPEG, statue.jpg. So, as with everything inside Photoshop, there's a variety of ways to achieve this. I think what I would like to do for you, though, is tie in some of the stuff that we learned in the previous exercises on working with selections. So what I want to try and do is I want to try and select this drabby, dreary background, and then maybe once we have it selected, we could try deleting it or getting rid of it or something like this. Okay? So once again, and I mentioned this in our earlier exercises, for me it's a process of elimination. Could I use my rectangular selection tool to grab the background? No, that's not going to work. The oval selection tool? No, that's not going to work either. How about creating a selection based on color? Yes, that would work. So that's going to be our quick selection tool, which we were, of course, introduced to earlier on. What I'm going to do with my quick selection tool, by the way, is I'm going to crank up his brush size from the options bar. How big? I don't know, maybe around 80 or 90 pixels or, somewhere in that neighborhood. I don't really know, something like that. And I'm going to zoom in on this guy. And what I want to try and do is make some selections based on color, the color that we see inside the background of the statue. So I'm not grabbing the statue, even though it's the statue that I want. I'm not grabbing the statue because there's too many colors in here, right? I'm grabbing the opposite of the statue. I'm going to create a negative selection, if that makes sense. So I'm going to start clicking and dragging down the left-hand side of the image, and boom, we have marching ants. Awesome. I'm going to continue clicking and dragging inside some of the background areas that we have inside the photo until I have a decent selection, something like this. Now, as a matter of fact, there's still 3 tiny slivers of background that we have inside this photo. Between the statue's staff and forearm, there's a tiny sliver there. Beneath the statue's hand, and between the staff and sort of the body there. And then way down in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a tiny sliver there as well. When you're doing this kind of stuff, you really have to keep an open eye and make sure you grab all the little bits and pieces. Okay? So give me a second here. I'm going to zoom in on my photograph. I'm just using Controller Command plus on my keyboard to zoom in. I've got to show you a really cool trick. I need to reduce down the size of my brush here. I could, do something like this, slide down and hopefully try and, guess at the right brush size. Try instead just using your square bracket keys on your keyboard. Notice they increase and decrease your quick selection tool's brush size. And this applies for the other painting-based tools inside Photoshop where we can increase and decrease the brush size. Very cool. So go ahead and adjust your brush size and then make your selection. It might not be perfect. There's still a tiny little piece of background in there. If this were the real world, I'd really get in there, but, time is of the essence here, so let's keep moving. It's not going to be an absolutely perfect selection, but I'll do my best to get at least a sort of a half-decent selection going, maybe something like that. There, I caught part of the edge of the statue there. I'm not going to bother fixing that, though. We'll just keep on moving here. And then way down in the bottom right-hand corner, as I had pointed out, there's another little sliver of background. There we go, something like that. Again, I could fiddle with this for a few minutes to get it absolutely perfect, but I think I'm going to leave well enough alone. Okay, so I have the background selected. That's really great. I'm going to tap the V key on my keyboard. That takes me back to the Move tool. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to tap the D key on my keyboard. Do you remember what that does? That reverts us back to the default foreground and background colors at the bottom of the toolbox. Here's what I want you to do next. Try tapping the Delete key on your keyboard. And when you do so, you'll be presented with Photoshop's Fill dialog box. And where we have contents and then use, just make sure that you're set to background color for now. So it's going to fill the selection with white in this first example. When I click on OK, this is what we wind up getting. So any area that was enclosed by marching ants is now filled in with white. Which, as a matter of fact, I mean, that's all fine and well, but that's not exactly what I wanted. What I really wanted is I wanted to pull the statue off the background, don't forget. So rather than being filled with white, really, if we stop and think about this, what we want is we want the selection to be filled with the transparency, that checkerboard pattern which we saw in the previous exercise. And then what we'll do is we'll throw another image that I have into the background, filling the checkerboard pattern. I hope that makes sense. So here's what I'm going to do instead. What I'm going to do with the selection still activated inside my image is I'm going to head over to the Layers panel. We were talking about the background layer and how the image was flat and we couldn't really edit it or do anything kind of fun or exciting to it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to convert the background layer to a regular Photoshop layer, a fully editable Photoshop layer. Here's how to do it. It's very intensive. Get your notepads ready. Double click on the background layer. I'm only kidding. It's really easy. Just double click on the background layer. We get the new layer dialog box coming up. You can throw a name into this guy if you want. How about statue? If I can type correctly, there we go, something like that. And then go ahead and click on OK. And now we no longer have a background layer. I can tell that it isn't a background layer because it doesn't say background and there's no lock icon that we see there either. Okay, now try pressing the delete key on your keyboard with your marching ants still active. Wouldn't you know it, we have now a checkerboard pattern inside of our marching ants. Isn't that awesome? Go ahead and deselect. Do you remember the keyboard shortcut to get rid of your marching ants? Controller Command D on your keyboard. And because I'm still on my move tool now, I can try things out. I can actually move my statue, in my case, around inside my image like so. How do you like that? Pretty awesome stuff. So that's how we can pull an object off of its background and also how we can convert a regular layer, a background layer, really I should say, into a regular Photoshop layer, fully editable. We can completely adjust this guy. Notice all the options towards the top now spring to life so we can go to town on this guy. Now, what about a situation where you have a more complex image? Maybe you have a street scene photograph or something like this, and there's a car on the street that you want to pull off the background. That is a real challenge. A lot of times people think it should be easy. Oh, just grab the car and away you go. Well, you got to select the car first. How do you select the car? Well, use your selection tools inside Photoshop, the ones that we've seen already, or perhaps some even more precise selection tools that we have available inside Photoshop, which we haven't taken a look at yet. It's not easy work. It's actually pretty tricky stuff. Once you isolate the object, though, as we have done here, then we can actually start working on the image and creating our composition inside Photoshop.